So, welcome to Dominate Your Day, Leah Coss. I loved reading your bio about being a speaker, identity strategist, and co founder and CEO of Build-A-Biz Kids. So, I can't wait for you to share with our audience today your journey and how your journey from a 16-year-old to where you are now, and as a speaker and a CEO. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you
And
so much.
thank you for being here today. So, tell us about this journey that you've been on and how this started.
Yeah, and actually it goes back further than 16. I feel like so much of our lives and who we've become today is such a reflection of just how we've operated through our life and what we've been exposed to. And for me, I definitely didn't have like a unique journey as far as I think. My parents divorced when I was 4. Not an uncommon story. We all have different perspectives of how that impacts our life. But for me, my parents got into somewhat toxic relationships after that. They also were not amicable through that. And so you have these two parents that are kind of tug of warring, if you will. But
Mm.
ultimately, they were making decisions, living with these other new people, both of which I'd say had a lot of personal traumas themselves. They were not healthy individuals, and they created a very toxic environment for me as a child. So I kind of grew up feeling like I couldn't trust the adults in my life because, as we know, there's that helpless feeling you have as a child, not being able to make decisions for yourself, being forced to do whatever the grown-ups in your life want you to do, live where you live, be exposed to what you're exposed to, and so on. So what's interesting is I hit teenage years, and I think regardless of whether you had a good upbringing or a bad upbringing, there is something designed in us as teenagers. We're supposed to push the limits. That's how we kind of test who are we? How does the world respond to us? It's just for me, I was like, ooh, finally, I get to start making some decisions of my own. And there was a part of me that we'll just say was a little petty as well. I was very excited to have my parents feel as helpless as I felt growing up. And so as a teenager, I made all the decisions you would never want your teenager to make. If we cross them off the list, I was doing drugs and selling drugs. I was doing criminal activity. I got arrested, as in fact, for stealing. I kind of kicked myself out of school and my home, and went to a school that was designed for kids that couldn't really operate in the regular system. So I wasn't going to graduate on time.
Mm.
I also was living with my boyfriend, which just made my parents so thrilled, and ultimately was not going anywhere fast, right? I even got tattoos and just, stuff like that that can leave those permanent marks on your future and your mind. And there was something that happened. There's two major incidents that really happened that now, they, as they say, Steve Jobs said, it's hard to connect the dots looking forward, but when you look backwards, you're like, oh, okay. I see how those connected now, right?
Mhm.
And so looking back, when I really think about identity and who I was, how I was able, like, why was I the teenager that was able to 180 her life and stop all of that to then go on to be, capable, contributing member of society? And I really believe it was because I had created this early identity of myself when I was younger, all by accident. And when it comes to who we are, it's important to note that while it's heavily impacted by our external world, especially when we're young, because we have no real internal dialogue yet, because we have no perspective. So we're really relying on the people around us, the surroundings, the things that we hear and observe. And that's what then internalizes the dialogue. That dialogue becomes a method of thinking that we think over and over and over again, which create our beliefs. And those beliefs become just our habits of how we operate, the lens with which we see through. So when I was 13, no, I was younger than that. I was about 11, 12. I was 11, my stepbrother 12. We were in probably the more abusive household, not so good. And our escape was, let's make some money. And so if
Mm.
it wasn't nailed down in our house, we were grabbing it. We were going to flea markets. Back in those days, flea markets were just for like senior citizens selling their old antiques. Like there were no young kids there. So we were selling, we were making crafts and items like scarves and taking old Christmas cards and turning them into gift boxes and stuff like that. So I grew up with this feeling of like, oh, if ever it got really bad, like I can take a bus and I can go somewhere because that's how we got places when we were young. Uh,
Mhm.
if I needed to, I could talk to strangers confidently. I can
Mhm.
ask for help. I can go places, make money. And so that really built this feeling where I really believed that I was capable of doing anything. And I had already demonstrated that to myself. Other
Mm.
people telling you something is one thing, but if you can demonstrate it for yourself, it can really ingrain emotionally in you. The thing is as I became this teenager doing all of these destructive activities, there was a moment of clarity for me. And I believe it was so impactful because it wasn't someone lecturing me. We all hate
Mhm.
being lectured to, especially as teenagers, telling us, what path we're on and how it's not serving us. But this was a conversation I was overhearing of my boyfriend and his mom. And I was sitting on the stairwell eavesdropping. And it wasn't even about what she said. It was more so just her saying, you guys aren't good for each other. Like, where do you see this going? What kind of future are you going to have? And I had no recollection of the time of the flea markets and the capability and whatever. It was more so just this massive disconnect that I felt going, yeah, like although I'm making my own decisions like this, I'm making the wrong ones because the life that I envisioned for myself at a young age, this identity, this persona, was not at all what I was demonstrating today. And that disconnect allowed me to just have this moment of clarity that was my own clarity. That moment that I realized I want to make a change. And so that poor guy, the moment he walked upstairs from this tough conversation with his mom, I broke up with him. I went back to regular school, took extra courses during lunch, graduated on time. I got a car and my driver's license because I hadn't gotten that yet, got 2 jobs. And as they say, the rest is history. Of course, there's still things that I needed to do as a grown up to continue to better myself, but that was such a pivotal shift. When I reflect to every other milestone that's ever occurred to me where I've had some sort of leap forward or backward in my quality of life, achieving my goals, it's always come down to how I've felt and how I see the world. And that's really what's gotten me so passionate, especially in the last 7 years or so since starting my charity, which is truly me living vicariously, trying to give as many kids as possible the same experience at a really young age to demonstrate to themselves how capable they are and to tell themselves what they want, who they are, before the world starts to tell them for them who they should be. Things like parents, teachers, society, friends, etc. So that's a bit of a nutshell of my journey.
Yeah, great story. Really good story. I'm just hearing a little crackling, so I don't know if it's Riverside or what. So, um, we're gonna keep going, but I just don't know what the sound quality is gonna be.
Okay.
Um, but let's talk about how you created the charity and that definitely stemmed from your story of growing up and how you. I love the fact that you did this internal work yourself. It didn't sound like there was a mentor or somebody around you. It sounded like it was something that you had visualized as a child when you as early as days as when you go into the flea markets and just being resourceful with what you had. So how has that transferred into this work with kids that you're doing right now?
It's interesting because looking now, people would say, "Oh, you started the charity because you gained this clarity." When in actual fact, it goes backwards. My partner and I co-founded the charity really by accident. It was just going to be a fun hobby, and it was something that was really mostly at the time inspired by his son, who was 8 years old at the time, and he had come home kind of upset. Other kids in his other classes at school were getting to learn how to launch a business, but his class wasn't. And his
Oh,
dad had always been employed, and I'd always been entrepreneurial, been self-employed since my early 20s. And together we were just like, oh my gosh, let's just start offering some sort of entrepreneur program for young kids. And so we did. And that was a lot of fun. And all of a sudden, my background, which is franchising, scale, how do you leverage things to make things grow for a bigger impact, kind of
hmm.
kicked in. And I was like, ooh, this is fun. And at the time, I didn't know why. I just knew this was really connecting with me in a way that other missions and things of, companies that I'd been a part of just hadn't hit in the same way. And
Mhm.
so January 2020, I decided to slow down consulting and go more into the charity. And of course, we all know what happened in 2020. But
Yeah.
it created this interesting opportunity for me to really play around in a relaxed way with how we were going to run the charity. And it's interesting because it was through the course of those next couple of years that I was able to spend a little bit more time with myself. For one, we'd had hundreds of kids go through the program at that point, after just a couple of years, that I was able to see them in action and the changes that were happening in them. Where were they now? What had happened to them? I
Mm.
was then able to also look at or started to have these recollections of my own early entrepreneurial memories. And then all of a sudden, it was really only a few years ago that the big picture of how what we're doing and what my journey was, that they kind of came together. And I started to uncover this bigger mission that we could be doing. And so while on the surface, yes, we're teaching kids things like business or public speaking, digital literacy programs, and so on, it's really what those activities, those real world experiences are allowing the kids to do that's flexing those soft skills. And there's like over 70 of them. Things like resiliency, communication, leadership, confidence, self awareness. Decision making is a big one. If you don't know how to make decisions, it's impossible to really gain any momentum in your life. And these are things that kids are able to do in these programs in a very real way. And then we connected that to the mental health component, which, it just happens to be that a lot of the skills employers need, entrepreneurs need, and that
Mhm.
they're developing through these programs happen to also be a lot of the same skills that if someone is struggling with mental health, those are
Mhm.
the skills they're needing to develop. Confidence, this self awareness, this resiliency, coping mechanisms, communication, not just internal or externally, but internally with themselves. What is that dialogue? Awareness. So that's really what we're trying to do here is reach kids so young before the world's really kind of gotten their hands on them, to get them as aware of themselves as possible so that hopefully they can make different decisions based on different components, different data.
So these kids, I think I love the idea of your partner's son and how he was wanting to get into doing something entrepreneurial. What age did you start your program and how did you start it?
We reach kids as young as 7, and our age goes up to about 13, 14. So in North America, that's about grade 8 or 9.
Yeah.
The reason for that is grade 7 is around grade 2. So that means that they've got some of their basic 1+1s out of the way, and some basics of reading, which allows them to just simply express themselves easier in the program.
Mhm.
But our programs, for the most part, are kids teaching other kids. So there's no adults really in the program unless they're taking it in a classroom where maybe there's a teacher, but all the videos and stuff are their peers teaching them, mentoring them through the process. The reason that 13 and 14 is where we cut that off is because that's the age where, they call it the indicator years, because
Mhm.
that's where if they're going to have any mental health struggles, if they're going to be a high risk for dropping out of high school, you see it in grade 8 and grade 9. Their grades drop, their attitudes change, their friends groups change, their negative behaviors and decision making starts to kick in. And of course, I completely agree with that because that was my journey. That's when all this stuff started to happen, was we feel this autonomy, but we don't have a lot of guidance, and our
Mhm.
understanding of repercussions have not completely solidified. So we try to get kids experiencing things like rejection from customers, talking to customers, standing on a stage, expressing their inner thoughts and what their beliefs are and how the world should be. Get them used to just interacting and engaging with people that is not their inner circle. The biggest growth that happens in our programs is we actually tell parents, you're not allowed to be, for example, when the children launch their businesses, parents are not allowed at their child's table. Um, and all of the customers that come through, it's not their friends and family. Some are, but
Mhm.
it's 10,000 strangers shopping at a mall, doing their day to days, and that's who they're engaging with.
That's great. So, did you start working with the school, or did y'all just start this and kind of launch it separate from any organization? Just kind of did it on your own and then got the word out?
It's been an interesting evolution because when we started, it just made sense. Well, we'll run the programs, right? We'll market them, parents will register them. But when I started to really understand the gravity of what this could do, this can truly impact the economics of a nation. Because when we look at the factors there, it's about the next workforce. How
Mhm.
early can they start? How capable are they? As well, youth under 25 have the highest rate of mental health challenges. So that means they're taking mental health days that employers
Mhm.
are having to contend with. They tend to not stay in a job for longer than a year. They are more unsure of what they want and therefore unable to make decisions that they feel really confident in. So that really affects an economy in a major way.
Mm.
Growth, innovation, even just people having, if these youth these days are willing to live at home past the age of 27 and they don't care about getting their driver's license the way that,
That's
our
great.
generation did. So they
That's
just don't need money is not a driver for them. Fulfillment is, happiness is, which is great, but it
Mhm.
means we got to prepare them in a different way. So when we started, it was just about let's just do this for fun. When the mission really became apparent of the impact we could have, my franchise hat went on, which is how do we leverage and what do we need to leverage in order to reach the masses? And I mean the masses. We need to make sure that it doesn't matter if they live in the tiniest, most remote community. How do we get there? If they have a learning ability, how do we support them? If they have a language barrier because they're a newcomer, how do
Mhm.
we make sure that they're also able to connect? If they're in a family with a low economic household income, how do we make sure that they can participate? So we realized we need to go to where the kids are. The kids are, for the most part, in public school or they're going to their public libraries or they're working closely with some sort of nonprofit that supports some sort of vulnerable component of them that they're needing extra support with. And so we partner with them. We call them community partners. They apply for our programs to be able to use, and then they're able to obtain licensing through one of two ways. Sometimes they pay, sometimes they get a grant, and that allows us to get in the classrooms. So in 2023, we were able to grow by 15x in about 15
Great.
months, just in
Wow.
terms of reach. And that's through the power of leverage. And what's great is it takes a lot of pressure off of us because when we first started and we were running the programs, we didn't have facilitators that could work with kids on the spectrum. We couldn't
Mhm.
go into a tiny community that was a 10-hour drive away from the closest airport. Now we can. And that's been the power of community. And that's been the power of just looking at what we want to do differently and figuring out how can we best get there by working together, by partnering and not feeling like we have to do it all ourselves.
I love that. So you've been doing that. So you had a successful franchise business, and then you started this, and really working with these kids. And I love the name Build-A-Biz Kids. I think that is
It's a
really
mouthful.
powerful. It's, no, but it's neat. It really is. So it's a national charity now. So here you are, 5 years out of COVID, or 5 years from COVID, 7 years since you started. What is one of the stories you like to tell about one of the successes of one of your students?
Oh, goodness. There's so many. I mean, what's really fascinating is in one experience, a parent will observe their child completely transform. So imagine having a really shy child and you've put them in ballet and it's the ballet recital and you're seeing them on stage, right? You're like, oh my gosh, I just want to go up there and help them and hug them, right? But of course, that wouldn't allow your child the space to grow.
Right.
That's what happens here is we tell parents just go away, go shopping, right?
Yeah.
Your child survive and thrive on their own. They'll be fine. The parents literally observe their child completely transform. We had one parent, I was just listening to a video testimonial, going through some old footage, and she was like, yeah, my child's usually so shy. They don't like to talk to people. These are all projections the parent is placing on the child, right?
Mhm.
This is how I view them. When I
Mm.
stepped away, all of a sudden, he's not only talking to people, but he's really funny. Like, she
Mhm.
was so surprised. And it's like, they've always been funny. They've just always
Mm.
wanted to perform based on your expectations, which is why we need to remove you from their surroundings.
Mhm.
We had this one girl, Melody, she was making crocheted headbands and she was selling at a summer market. So crocheted things that you wear don't usually go as well at a summer market. And so she was a little discouraged. It was one of her first big markets. And we have certain protocols in place to help kids build their confidence. We send it over a couple of plans, meaning we give them some money and said, hey, can you go shop from her, but ask her questions, get her talking about why she did it, why she loves it, the features, benefits of her elevator pitch. So she made those couple of sales, and all of a sudden she got regular sales. And that momentum kept going throughout the market, that by the end of the market, she wasn't even standing at her booth. Like she went from complete, just devastated, looking around, comparing herself to others, really feeling defeated, to by the end of the market, she wasn't even at her booth. She had all of her headbands on both arms, walking around, coming up to people going, I have got the perfect color headband to match what you're wearing. And she's like pulling them off and hustling people. And of course, how do you say no to a 10-year-old who's
Mm-hmm.
giving you so much of their heart into their sales pitch? But that's the kind of transformation that occurs. But it can't be done by someone telling them that they can. They need the space to demonstrate it for themselves. And once they do, they become unstoppable. It's really incredible. I'd say confidence is probably the most observable change that a parent will see in their child.
So, what do you see now as you look at, well, I guess the next generation alpha, is that right? Is this alpha generation? And
Yeah.
you talk about getting into the workplace. You also, I saw that you're teaching them how to speak or
Mhm.
how to present themselves. What do you see as you prepare these kids for work and prepare them for their career and to use their unique talents for that? What are you seeing happening all of a sudden?
When you look at, say, LinkedIn or Forbes, when they do their top 20 list, what are the skills that employers want in, the people that they
Mhm.
hire? At this stage, like it was really only about 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, where it was mostly technical skills. I remember being in college, and if you couldn't put that you knew Microsoft Word and Excel on your
Yeah,
resume, you were out, right?
yeah.
It was all about the technical skills because technology was so new and it was a really high demand need. Now, kids are born out of the womb knowing how to use an iPad and, surf
Mhm.
the web. It's crazy. So
Yeah.
technical skills are moving at such a pace, employers do not really care. And if they do put that on a top 10 list, it's like AI literacy. Because
Mhm.
what part of AI do you want them to know? I don't.
Mhm.
It's impossible to keep up. I just need them to know what it can do so that they
Mhm.
learn and adopt whatever it is that as a company we need to learn and adopt. When you look at the top 20 skills, at least 18 of them are all soft skills: leadership, collaboration, innovation, creativity, decision making, resiliency,
Mm.
awareness, adaptability, flexibility. These are the things that employers need. They're also the skills that you cannot learn in a book, right? Empathy.
Right.
I use the example, and I don't mean this to be an attack on people, but if somebody is a psychopath who doesn't have the capability of empathy, they could
Right.
take a course or a program to learn the theory of empathy and pass a test. It doesn't mean they've become empathetic.
Right.
We need to start looking at these programs that are like, we teach confidence, we teach resiliency. Well, unless the kids are enacting something that they're also internally motivated to want to achieve. Meaning,
Mm.
just have them play a game. If the kid's like, why do I care about this game? And they're just going through the motions, they're still not building confidence and resiliency. So when we put kids in a situation where they've made all of their own decisions, whether that be designing their speech and what the topic is and what they want to say, their
I
business
love that.
product is, how they've designed their logo, what price they've set it at. They're internally motivated to succeed, which means when someone says, I don't like the red slime, but I like the blue slime, they don't see the dislike of one as a rejection. They see that as data. They see that as an opportunity to be like, oh, I'm glad I didn't make a lot more of that. I should make more of this, right?
Mhm.
So they're receiving the information differently. And that's really what the classrooms are needing and starting to evolve into, as more of an experiential learning as opposed
Mhm.
to a textbook, read it, memorize it, and then regurgitate it. A lot of school districts are starting to realize that's not, they still have to meet certain memorization components. they're really trying to become more flexible. The thing is we all know the education system is limited on funds. It's
Right.
limited on the expertise to create those kinds of programs. There's so many, God love them, there's so many teachers that are trying to design their own programs like this. They have no resources. They're having to find videos on YouTube that's probably designed for high school or college age kids. They're not getting paid extra for designing this curriculum, right? Uh,
Mhm.
they're trying to fit something into a curriculum that's not always super receptive to that change.
Mhm.
So that's where we really try to partner with education systems, support teachers at a teacher level to help them be able to provide this kind of experiential education in a way that their district is also going to be on board with.
Is
But
there anything else out there like this? Are you the only group doing this age kids, Build-A-Biz Kids and all that you're doing? Have you found anything else out there like this?
so if I were to say the way that we do this, there's no one else doing it the way
Mhm.
we do this. And I'll quantify that. So are there other, say, entrepreneur programs or public
Yeah.
speaking programs? Absolutely. There's some that have been around for, I'm not exaggerating, 100 years.
Mhm.
But the problem is there's oddly the hypocrisy of it. We're teaching kids to innovate, but there's been no innovation there, especially for this age group. Pretty much every program that I have seen that is made for, say, classroom use is a black and white printed binder for teachers to flip through. And maybe
Mm.
a couple of videos or something like that. But with my franchise mind, I go, okay, I need to make sure that this is so turnkey because teachers, they often went from high school to college or university and then they're teaching. They've never started a business. This is intuitive.
Right.
If we put this in the hands of a nonprofit and they're hiring college students as volunteers, I need to make sure this is like click here for step one, click here for step two. Um, we're really the only ones who have like kids teaching kids in
Kids.
the
I
program.
love that.
The visual components, this I call them respectfully the YouTube generation.
Mhm.
Their need for engagement is just different than what we had when we were young. I mean, we could be entertained with, a pen, pencil, a rock, a quarter,
Mm.
like we could make a game up because we had no technology growing up. They do. Their standards are higher. So we've designed this to be very high on the engagement spectrum, but very unintimidating for the person actually delivering the program. And then in terms of how we do this, you know, um, it's sustainable. Like when we partner with a community, they forever have access unless there's something where they're not meeting a commitment, they're breaching some sort of license
Mhm.
and they have that. Whereas many other programs, you're paying, it costs $2,000 to $4,000 for that organization to run one program one time. And
Yeah.
then if you want to run another program, you got to do that all over again because we're all about partnerships and leverage. No one's doing it the way that we are, which makes our
Mhm.
costs very affordable and sustainable. So that if we're really going to impact the masses, as I mentioned, like if we want to have an economic change in mental health numbers and future readiness for the next generation, contributing to the economy, we have to
Mhm.
reach everybody, which
Yeah.
means year after year, we can't skip a grade. We can't miss a child. We can't have a district say, I can't afford it this year. We need to make sure that this is sustainable long term. And that's really the model that we've created, which is where the innovation is. And then the secondary innovation is the actual programming, the materials, and that it's actually designed for this age group.
That's so exciting. Well, as we get ready to close out, and congratulations for what you're creating. And I love how you're filling a void of helping this generation get ready and then teaching them those soft skills and, and filling that void that the schools can't fill and that the parents haven't been able to fill. So, is there anything as we get ready to close out that you want to share with the audience that we haven't gotten to talk about and you want to make sure we cover today?
Well, I always like to mention, so we also have programs for parents. That's, say,
Mm.
for example, growth mindset. How do you instill a growth mindset in kids?
Mhm.
And all the things that I've talked about, whether it be shifting your identity, developing these soft skills, being able to live a thriving, life into the future. As parents, we want these things for our kids.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if we also don't want it for ourselves, kids are mirrors of us,
Mhm.
we also can end up being a reason why we're holding our child back because we're projecting our beliefs onto them. We're
Mhm.
praising them the way that we were praised growing up. And even if it's positive praise isn't necessarily growth mindset praise. It's often fixed mindset praise. And
Mhm.
so for whatever it is that you want for your kids, I always say want it for yourself as well. And it'll be an incredible journey of you not only living and demonstrating a more thriving, happy, fulfilling life for yourself that you can then share with your
Mhm.
child, but then you're going to be demonstrating it for them to be able to emulate.
That's such a good point. I always say that we helped start a school here in Dallas, and I always said, that I learned from that is that parents, the kids are really, they're parroting whatever their parents are saying. There's this little parrot thing that goes on, and you're like, whoa, you just realizing the impact you make as a parent. So I think that's great. Well, wonderful what you're doing, Leah. How can people reach you? What is the best way? We can put it in the show notes as well. But what is your preferred way of connection for people that can reach out to you, whether they need you, would like you to come speak, or they want further information about your Build-A-Biz program?
Sure. So I'm pretty easy to find. I'm the only Leah Coss out there. So you can Google me and my website will come up. LinkedIn is probably the next best thing. And that's where you can kind of book me to speak or connect with me. But if you're curious about the charity, it's buildabizkids.com. And that's where you can find out more about our initiatives.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today and making a big difference and an impact in the world. And we just love how you transform your life, and now you're doing that for others. So thank you.